Today, my guest on Wellbeing Wednesdays is a very interesting person. He first became an entrepreneur when he was in college, when he saw a dog who was crushed under the wheels of a car, and he started his first venture where he was making denim collars with reflectors so that he could save the lives of dogs. This caught the attention of none other than Mr. Ratan Tata, who invested in his startup. Then this gentleman went overseas for his further studies, came back, and started another venture which has empathy as the underlying foundation of what he's doing. He understood that loneliness and no one to speak to is the biggest challenge that old people face. And he thought of doing something about this for them. He started Goodfellows. And to talk about Goodfellows, I have with me the founder, Shantanu Naidu. Welcome, Shantanu, to Wellbeing Wednesdays with Harbinder Narula. So, Shantanu, my first question to you is that you are a kind person. But how did you decide to turn this acts of kindness into an entrepreneurial opportunity?
Right. So thank you, first of all, for acknowledging me as a kind person. I think that's pretty subjective given the many levels of kind acts that people do on a daily basis. Mine just seem to have a little bit more visibility. But I don't think that I had the intention of converting them into an entrepreneurial journey. I just knew that when I had a problem that I felt very passionately about and very deeply about, in the sense that it was an impact that I wanted to create by solving a particular problem, it just happened to turn into an entrepreneurial journey. So I don't think it was ever an intention to sort of marry the both of them, but in the adventure of solving the problem, it turned into an entrepreneurial journey. So I think I would leave that there. Yeah.
You feel that, by turning it into an entrepreneurial opportunity, it actually leads you to a little more sustainable way of doing it?
Definitely. The outcome of entrepreneurial pursuit in these particular problems is less about profits and margins and being a unicorn startup and more about sustainability. See, when you add the entrepreneurial angle to a cause or to a social problem, you ensure accountability. You ensure a certain level of quality that goes unanswered in the non-profit space quite a lot of times through no fault of the non-profit itself, but due to lack of resources, due to lack of a model that will keep sustaining it, and due to the large basis on the fact that you have to rely on donations and donations alone. So the only intent of having these causes convert into an entrepreneurial journey is solely to sustain it longer and longer. If there are margins, and we don't know yet how much those will be or if they will be, those will definitely be plowed back into further sustaining the organization, improving the organization, or innovating for the cause that we've undertaken. So definitely sustainability is priority number one for turning this into an entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. So Shantanu, can you explain what does Goodfellows do?
Right. So in Goodfellows, we are a bunch of young graduates between the ages of 18 and 30. And we offer companionship to seniors living alone in India, usually above 60 years of age. Living alone is not classified as absolutely not having immediate family. A lot of them have immediate family who are abroad, who have moved on, who are in the same city, but are engaged in professional engagements, which in 2022 are quite heavy, and nobody can be blamed for that. So what the Goodfellows do is basically they act as auxiliary grandkids. And while that's might sound like a bit of a odd statement, we basically do everything that a grandkid would. Now, the intention is not to replace a family member or to replace a grandkid, but to be able to provide them with the kind of companionship that a grandkid or a family member would provide. Now, when people ask us what are the services that Goodfellows provide, we genuinely mean that we would do everything a grandkid would do, but just for the sake of clarity, I can list a few things that our Goodfellows have done in the past, which ranges everything from just sitting around and having a chit chat, catching up on their stories, which they have nobody to share with, going on walks, which they have given up on because they don't have companionship or security, playing board games, learning something new, to more utilitarian things like accompanying you to the doctor, teaching you technology, or teaching you basically anything that you want to learn, including net banking or something new that is relevant today, but has been irrelevant in their lives. Now, even though I've mentioned all these things, we have gone above and beyond all of these things, because once that formation of a bond happens between a good fellow and a senior, then the seniors themselves start treating them as grandkids, and the requests start becoming like those you would expect from a grandkid. So whenever a senior calls us, for example, we never say that these are the 10 things we do and these are the things we do not. If your grandkid would do it, we would do it.
Awesome. That is brilliant. So, Shantanu, what do you think is missing in the lives of these people that Goodfellows fulfills? Apart from the services that you said, what is that missing thing that you are fulfilling?
I believe it's emotional engagement. And again, I will emphasize on the word companionship. And while we mention companionship, and to many listeners, companionship is a very broad word. Companionship means different things to different people, but in the end, it comes down to a very simple thing, which is someone to sit from across to and to be able to speak. And that is something that is so fundamental and a given privilege in your life and mine, that we forget that the people who do not have it really crave for it. It's not a want anymore, it's a need, because it affects your cognitive functions, it affects your physical health. So a lack of a person to look forward to speak to, or the lack of an individual who you can rely on, can literally deteriorate your physical mental health by 9 to 15%, just like that, because it does not give you a sense of purpose, and you just end up in a rabbit hole which you just keep sinking into. So if I had to answer your question in a very binary way, it's just literally a person to speak to. Now all the services sort of bloom out from that, but we have so many people to speak to in our daily lives as a part of our routine, of our jobs, of our stepping out in the world in general, that we forget that if you were succumb to staying alone at home, and if you had to repeat that every single day, then you also withdraw from social engagements that you would have done if somebody else pushed you. So that is what we're trying to target.
Got it. So how difficult is it to recruit young people for this work? And how do you typically go about it? And how do you choose these people? What are the parameters that you look on? Because it is far beyond the money, or there has to be some inherent purpose which gets fulfilled.
Right. And you're absolutely bang on, and you've already answered half the question. But it is a very difficult process, and we don't mince words about that. It is a very difficult process to be hand-picking individuals who have a sense of affinity towards seniors, who have a general sense of empathy and emotional intelligence, and so to speak, to put it in broad terms, is a kind person. So how do you evaluate a kind person? You can never do it 100%, but we have managed to be close, and we will endeavor to keep getting close to that. So we have 7 layers of interviews and different tests combined. The first 3 are personal interviews, interactions, coffee chats, putting them in different environments with our senior teams, and sort of gauging who they are as a person and why they have a plan, what they intend to do with Goodfellows. And we do this without them realizing it. So it's not like I ask a question, they answer a question, and we take their word for it. It's more letting their guard down without them realizing it. After that, we have a bunch of psychometric tests that we have designed in-house, which gauge the emotional intelligence and empathy and sensitivity of a person. After that, we have third-party background checks from an agency that we work with. And they do everything from professional, educational, bona fide checks And then there are more logistical checks like a police background check, for example, because after all, it is in the end a person not known to you entering your house. Even after all of that, if they qualify all of this, we put them on a month-long probation, because a candidate can be stellar in all of these rounds and still not perform when he finally starts working with a senior. So for a month, they are supposed to shadow an existing good fellow that we already have in an environment of a senior that we already have as a subscriber. And then we observe them, and genuinity and authentic behavior and authentic connection cannot be faked. So it becomes very obvious in the first month itself if whatever this person said in the 7 levels of interviews is in fact true, because you will never know who a person is and how he is unless you actually start working with them. At the end of 1 month, if we find that they are in fact putting where mouth is, then we continue with them. And if they do not live up to that expectation, then we have a conversation where we do not continue with them. Seekers condition that we let them know from the beginning. So it's not a surprise. This 1 month probation is not a sudden shock to them, but it's an absolute necessity. But just to give you a clear picture of how difficult it is to select these people, we almost end up selecting 6 to 8 people among 600 applicants. So it's almost a 1 to 1.5% conversion. And while we would want that to be more, we do not and will not do that by compromising on any of the factors that I've mentioned here, which in the end, in the startup space and the entrepreneurial space, means that scale up will be extremely slow. And while that's the red flag for a lot of people in the startup ecosystem, that's an absolutely okay fact by us. We are absolutely okay with the fact that if we have to grow slowly at 100th of the rate of any other startup, we're absolutely okay with that, because this company is centered around empathy and choosing the right individuals. And if we mess that up and give any average or below average quality or connection to any of the seniors, they will see right through it, because they have seen the world. They have decades on us. And the moment you start to fake it, they know. So we will never endeavor to do that.
So Shantanu, I mean, my next question would have been that, do these guys do it for money or is beyond that? So I already have an answer to that it's not the money that is at the core, right?
But I will definitely add on a few points to that subsequent question as to why Goodfellows is a paid service and why these are paid individuals. So the number one reason is when you form an authentic connection with the senior expects to see the same person over and over again. You cannot rotate and change that person based on our priorities. It has to be them and their connection that matters. The only way that you can send the same person to the senior over and over again is if you have retained that person as an employee. If that person is a volunteer, then as per the volunteer's priorities, they might go a few days and they might not go a few days. And altruistic urges end up getting exhausted, and then people move on. But the senior is left in the dark because they took the effort of opening up to someone, and suddenly that person is gone, and now you have sending a new person. And then that just kills the meaning of companionship, and they don't open up anymore. So number one reason is it has to be the same person going to their houses, which means they have to be employees, which is why they have to be paid. Second, these are young educated graduates. These are not they deserve dignified salaries, because irrespective of the profession that they studied for, they have set that aside, or they're balancing that with giving their complete lives to seniors. If they're doing that, then they absolutely deserve dignified pay so that they don't worry about their financial troubles. Because if they don't worry about their financial troubles, then they can give their absolute and complete attention and heart to the senior whose house they're visiting. So,
sorry, please go ahead.
So these are the two main reasons.
Right.
And third, passing before, is there's a certain level of accountability. When we are sending a good fellow who is a paid individual of the organization, he is accountable to perform. And when I say perform, I don't mean act or be as a part of a script, but he's accountable to hold up a certain quality of individualism with the senior, and which we are constantly observing. So.
So Shantanu, this intrigues me actually, that, when you're looking at people, it's more of soft skills, social skills, that an emotional quotient that matches with between the person who's going to be the good fellow as well as the senior person who they are bonding with. Now,
Right.
How do you match these people? Because not everybody can get along with everyone.
That's a great question, actually, especially for the demographic that we are working with, which is people and individuals above 60 who have a certain way of life, routine, and personal ambitions and prejudices, which are fairly justified. So the pairing process is not just sending whoever is available. We do an introductory meeting with the senior to understand their personality traits and priorities. And then we compile those. And on the other hand, we already have a database of profiles of our good fellows and their characteristics and their strengths and weaknesses. And then we end up pairing on the basis of that. And it can be something as simple as linguistic compatibility, like someone who's Gujarati, hoping that there's someone, the good fellow is Gujarati. Some people prefer an intellectual person. We've literally had requests from seniors who said that I have been an intellectual all my life. I need to have intellectual conversations. So who do you think will fit? And based on that, we give them a couple of options. Now, they're always free to say that this person is not working out. And we absolutely give them the freedom to either end the service there or provide them with another good fellow. But in the history of Goodfellows, we've never had that situation because of the care we take to pair the person. So yeah, that's the pairing process.
So Shantanu, what has been some of the experiences of these old people working with the young Goodfellows? Something that you want to share, any one particular or two experiences?
Absolutely. And I don't know where to begin because my mind goes to all the seniors that we have on board right now. But some of the sentences that they mention, which cannot be taken lightly because they carry so much weight, is, you have changed my life completely. I would never have done this if it wasn't for you. And to be a little more specific, we have people stepping out for the first time since COVID, even after COVID has gone. Some of the events that we do, for example, movie night, we have a handicapped individual, a senior in his 70s, who agreed to be in a wheelchair for the first time in his life just to watch a movie, because one of our good fellows gave him the confidence to do that, or to resume walks, or to make them believe that whatever negative thoughts they have are not actual reality and that they have their back. And the ultimate general pattern that I've seen is once they establish the connection, they usually go around introducing the good fellow as their grandkid or granddaughter. And we've seen like one of our good fellows accompanying our grandpal on the walk, and she will introduce her to the circle as she's a good fellow, but to me, she's like a granddaughter. And while these statements might seem too good to be true, they actually happen on a daily basis. And one of the practices that we have at Goodfellows is the moment the good fellow finishes a session with a senior, they immediately have to type out a complete debrief with every single detail into a group that we have so that no detail is missed. And we can sort of study the nuances of that and see if anything is missing or if anything is working. And those debriefs, reading them on a daily basis is really heartwarming because somebody starts playing carom again. Somebody's taken out their old Casio that they had in the cupboard. Somebody's watching a movie again. So, parts of them that they've forgotten or given up on are sort of getting revived.
So, I mean, these are the experiences of the grandpals. But what are some of the experiences of the good fellows? I mean, when this, I'm sure it is like heartwarming when they actually meet them. They also must be, creating a bond or an affinity with those people. So have you gone through situations where somebody has, kind of stayed on even when they wanted to move on in their career? but stayed on just because they didn't want to. Any such experiences?
Yes, actually, we do have one intern who had joined us for 3 months, and she wanted to pursue higher education, but she's like, I cannot leave my seniors alone because of the connections that she has. And we are absolutely equipped to help her transition to a new Goodfellow and have her go on to her higher education. But because she has created that bond, she just now does not want to go. And this sort of highlights an important point in today's millennial and younger generations, Gen Z, Gen X, is everyone from these generations is looking for a sense of fulfillment from the jobs that they do. They are no longer succumbing to doing mundane work day in and day out and being a one-person contributor to an organization. There are people who do that and are happy, and there is nothing against them. But there is a rising trend of people, youngsters, who want a sense of impact and satisfaction from putting in 8 hours in a day. That what does it matter in the end? And Goodfellows is a place where you can see the impact instantly. You get the reward instantly. And the time that you're putting in is literally impacting another life. So, which is why the Goodfellows are extremely attached to their grandparents. However, we don't push them. So every Goodfellow has a cap of 3 seniors at best, because we have to take care of their mental health. Because each Goodfellow is a recipient to so many stories, which are not always positive. They come from trauma, they come from experiences that the seniors have had, which are painful. And even as a listener, it takes a toll on your mental health. So just because we have 8 hours in a day with each Goodfellow doesn't mean we plug in 6 grandpas. We cap it at 3 seniors at best. We give them enough breaks in between. And if they feel like it's getting overwhelming, we have an in-house psychologist who helps them navigate those feelings. If they want a mental health break, they can take those. So Goodfellows their mental health is as important as the seniors also.
Can you share some of the frustrating experiences where, because sometimes the young people get frustrated with the ways of the seniors? Does this happen often?
It does not happen often, because I would owe that to the recruiting process itself, which I described in detail, because they come with a sense of affinity and accommodation to an extent where what would nag probably an ordinary individual does not bother these young individuals. Having said that, it's not absolutely impossible that it happens. They come from different views, for example, different principles and different, I would say, values that might not match with the values of a young millennial or Gen Z from 2022. But in such situations, we ask them to remind themselves of only one fact, that what would you do if it was your own grandfather? You would not deal with it with aggression or disappointment. You would deal with it with accommodation. And dealing with it with accommodation does not mean that you have to agree with them. You just have to understand that they come from a time and space which might not be similar to yours, but that does not make them a bad person or a person undeserving of companionship. So regardless of these frustrations, we persevere. But no frustrations have ever come through which have made us stop or end something.
So, Shantanu, the one question that comes to my mind is that a lot of these grandpas have their children living abroad or even in the same city, but they're living separately because of whatever, professional situations, etc. What is the acceptance among them for these kind of services? Do they feel guilty, or do they feel that, why is somebody intruding into my parents' life? What's the acceptance level among them?
That is an excellent question, and I'm so happy you asked that, because I used to think on the same lines as you before we launched, and I was like, how do we create that acceptance in a family structure which is so embedded in culturally embedded in being there for your own family? But it's just been the opposite. More than half of the requests we get are calls from the sons and daughters themselves, who are living abroad or who are living separately in the city. And it's not coming from a place of shame. It's coming from a place of acceptance that in a world, professional world that is in 2022, um, professional liabilities are so high that you just have to find a way to keep your parents occupied and happy. And there is no guilt and shame there. And neither do we ever make them feel that way, because this is all circumstance and progression of society. And while we can't stall that, we can definitely help transition. So we have been so happy to accommodate the sons and daughters in this process, who half the times reach out themselves, or even if they don't reach out themselves, we take the effort of reaching out to them and saying, look, your father or mother has reached out, and we don't want you to feel as if it's happening as an isolated process without you knowing. So we are doing this. This is what we do. Would you like to be involved in the process? And they 100% agree. And they also, the acceptance is also high because every debrief, every session, every development or joy that the senior gets from this is immediately communicated to the family right after the session. And to see live updates of how your father or mother or grandfather, grandmother is engaged, nobody is going to say that they're sort of doing what I should be doing. It's just a general sense of acceptance. And I'm pleasantly surprised by the fact that we did not have any resistance from immediate family. It's just acceptance, and I really don't know how to explain it. It's just there, and I'm just so happy that it is.
I mean, this is a very pleasant revelation. I mean, you experienced it. It's a very pleasant to hear that the families are accepting it. Shantanu, at the end of the day, like we discussed, that this needs to be a sustainable effort, which means the costs need to be covered. People have to pay for it. How sustainable is the business model? Who's paying for this? And what's your vision about the venture, both from the goodness perspective as well as from the entrepreneurial perspective?
Right. So the subscribers are the people who pay. And when the sons and daughters approach us, usually they offer to pay for it rather than having the parents pay for it. Those who don't have immediate family pay for it themselves. However, we've kept it fairly affordable for a pensioner or a retiree. But before they even decide to pay, we give them a month of completely free services because we want them to experience it. See, this has never been done before. And it is, if you're a first mover, especially in a demographic that is so resistant to change, we have to show them what the value is. And we have to let them decide if it is valuable. We can't be telling them that this is valuable, you should accept it. So that 1 month, we allow them to experience it. And on the 30th day, we ask them if it is adding value in their life. If it is, we discuss the subscription with them and they go ahead with it. If it is not, then we absolutely back off, because irrespective of the fact that it might be a for-profit model for a social cause, it does not mean we want to push our services on people who don't want it. That would just be unethical and immoral. But we have had 100% conversion rate from the free months to the subscription. And we owe it to the quality of the individuals we have chosen, the quality of the connections that they make. And once they've gone through that, they don't really see their life without it. And that's the goal. And we endeavor to subsidize it in the future as we go along, but it's too early to say when that turn of events will happen. Right now, I would like to repeat, we are not looking to make margins and profits and valuations and such stuff. We are just looking to sustain it as long as possible with as little to be charged as possible. Now, it is not easy to bring a social cause into a for-profit space. And while we can see clear indications of demand and people who want to pay, they're paying. We will always be committed to making this work regardless of how many pivots we have to make in the business model in the future. So if 6 months from now, the revenue is flowing very well and it's self-sustaining and we have good investors, very good. If that does not happen in 6 months or more than a year, we will find another way. Because now that we've had a taste of the kind of impact that it creates in the lives of seniors in India, there's just no way that we're ever going to shut shop on this, regardless of whether this particular business model works or not. We will find another way.
Is your model in acceptance or receiving donations?
That is the tricky part because of regulations. Because if you are set up as a for-profit model, then donations are something that cannot be accommodated as per regulations. However, we are introducing a concept where you can sponsor a grant, like a senior. So if you, for example, say that, I have money to spare per month, and I would like to sort of take on the responsibility of one senior that you can send a Goodfellow to, then we are making accommodations where your payment directly sends a Goodfellow to someone's house who cannot probably afford it. However, we are finding out the nuances of that, but it's very much in the near future.
One thing that comes to my mind is that sometimes it is believed that if something comes for free, it is not valued as much. What is your thought on this, especially when you're looking at a sponsorship model?
Right. No, I agree. And it will be a challenge to segregate people who are truly not able to pay and people who will be exploiting that system. And like I said, we will work out the nuances of that. But you are right about the fact that when it comes for free, people don't respect it as much. And one of the most basic and rudimentary examples was even before we launched and when we were in the beta stage, we had set up a stall at the farmers market, because farmers market attracts a lot of seniors and we wanted to speak to them, have a conversation, tell them about what it is. And we were giving out free tote bags. And the moment that we mentioned free tote bags, they would just walk away from the stall because they would just not believe that anything that comes for free does not come with like strings attached. So you're absolutely right. But it won't be an open thing where like our business model completely gets overturned and everyone starts sponsoring somebody else. It will be a very nuanced process. And we have ways of finding out whether the gentleman or whoever the senior is actually in need of it or not. It does not involve forensic audits like going into the bank accounts. But after a month of premium, we have a fair idea of who needs it and who doesn't. So, but I think that, if you are a sponsor, for example, giving you the updates that I get on a daily basis from the Goodfellow would be such a injection of joy and fulfillment in the life of the sponsor that you just kind of get hooked to it because you immediately see the impact. So I'm counting on that, but let's see.
Got it. So Shantanu, with every opportunity, there's fair share of challenges that come in. Specifically, when you're dealing with somebody who you have, even though you've gone through a very stringent recruitment process, at the end of the day, there is someone that you're sending to somebody's house. You are in very little control of what is going on there.
Right.
So there are two things that come into our mind. In fact, I'm clubbing two questions. How do you handle the security and trust issues of these young people going into the houses? One. Second is, how are you training these young people to tackle any medical emergencies that may occur during the process?
Right. So in number one, we have created a sense of accountability and indirect surveillance, if you might, by having them on the books. And when you have someone on the books to the extent that we have in terms of every single job and education and college that they've been to in the past, their identification, their bona fide neighbors, etc., it's very unlikely that things go out of hand because you just cannot escape you just cannot get away with something. And while in the senior space, we might be thinking of this from a more sensitive perspective, which is understood. You can think of it from like an urban clap or any other service that has someone visiting your house. How do you know? You have all the details. The company has all the details. And of course, the liability rests on us, which we do not intend to deflect. But I think after having put all those checks and certificates and putting them on the books legally, It is our best system that we can avail of right now. We did think of going one step further and having surveillance literally, but that is a serious invasion of privacy, and it might also affect how a senior is behaving or how a good fellow is behaving, because if you know that you're being constantly watched, it's a very difficult process. And regardless of that, we have our relationship managers check in on the seniors without the knowledge of the good fellows very frequently, which means that it can be something as serious as what you have mentioned, or it can be something as basic as I just don't feel comfortable, and we will still take that seriously. None of these have happened in the past, but as we scale up, since you're asking about a particular situation, I think having them on the books legally and them knowing that they are on the books legally and they cannot escape with any kind of misconduct is the best system we can rely on today after the 7 checks. In terms of the second question, they do get trained in emergency medical training. We have surgeons and doctors and EMT professionals come in from different hospitals voluntarily to train these individuals as the part of their orientation. Apart from that, we ourselves, the founding team, give them a complete breakdown and orientation of how to be a good fellow. Now, it is very important to note that we don't script them. We don't tell them what to say. We do not intend to compromise on their individuality and authenticity in any circumstance. But we do tell them some of the nuances of this demographic. What are the things that are usually important to them, what they should be mindful of? For example, punctuality is something that might be flexible for our generation, but for that generation, if you're 5 minutes late, it is sort of seen as a lack of interest or a lack of responsibility, because they come from that time and age, and you have to respect that. So these nuances we sort of embed in the orientation that we give them, but we do not tell them what to say and how to say it. They just have to be themselves.
I mean, it's brilliant that you recognize the cultural nuances of the 2 different generations. In fact, it's not even just the next generation. It is skipping 1 generation. It's the second generation which is dealing with each other. That's brilliant. Shantanu, what has been your personal learning while setting up and managing the process at Goodfellows? In fact, your entrepreneurial journey began when you were in college. Right. So what has been your personal learnings?
Right. There are 2 things that I really, in my entrepreneurial journey, would be important. One I learned in college itself is validation of what you're trying to do. And the number 1 reason, according to Financial Times, why startups fail in general, or any entrepreneurial venture fails, is not because of lack of funding or a good co-founding team. Those are reason number 2 and 3 according to statistics. The number 1 reason is because there's no market need. You have to find out if the market actually needs what you're trying to give it. And a lot of people who come up with ideas are so married to the ideas themselves that they just skip this process, and they say that if I believe in the idea, then everyone will have to believe in the idea. I know everyone will. But like an example I often give is I love pineapple on pizza. I love it so much that I just find it impossible that someone else might not like it. But if you actually go out in the world, you'll find that you are a minority and people actually don't like pineapple on pizza. Something that you would never know if you don't go out and ask people. So this going out, asking people and seeing if there is an actual need is a step that people skip so often that they end up sort of tanking. This is for any entrepreneurial venture, social or otherwise. And we did that extensively for a whole year before we actually decided to launch. And the second learning I have is the people that you're choosing are so important. And I'm no longer talking about this from a Goodfellows perspective, because those are obviously need to be vetted carefully. But just the people that you're creating something from scratch with, and they might be co-founders or core members, it's so important that they have the same amount of faith and passion for the thing that you are doing. Because if you believe in something 100% and your team believes in it 20%, it's just like it's just so much frustration, and you're just gonna hit a wall after a point. Because on days where you don't believe in the concept, on days where you feel like, I don't think this is going anywhere, there needs to be someone else with a hand on your shoulder and say that I still believe in it, and I think we can still do this. Without that, it's very difficult.
So, Shantanu, I'm going to take you on that second part of your answer. And I'm not talking of people who are mentors. I'm not talking of people who could be coming in, to be a part of your dream from a very different perspective. But I'm looking at hiring people, employees.
Right.
So as an entrepreneur, as a visionary of the dream that you're living, your purpose and your passion could be very different from the levels of passion. I'm not saying they're not passionate, but the levels of passion and the belief and the vision and the skin in the game of the employees. Now, how do you, in your personal experience, have managed this? Because in what you are doing, that is the basis of the success.
Right. So that's a great question. And I love the term skin in the game. I often use it because without that, you really don't have a team. But I think if the raw material is there, then making it happen is easy. And when I say raw material, I mean in Mr. Tata's words, which he's used before, fire in the belly. If you have that literal urge and that need to just get on to this a particular project and just sort of contribute to it and be a part of it, then the team sort of assembles itself, despite the lack of skills, or despite maybe not having as much passion as the founder himself, like me, but they eventually get there. So it's like a spectrum. If they're anywhere close to you, I would take them. You shouldn't be on the polar end also, where I don't see the same passion exactly as the same as me, so it's not going to work out. You'll end up having no people at all. But you sort of have to take chances. And like I said, you never know a person until you actually work with them. They will be stellar in the interviews, stellar on paper, but you just have to work with them and find out. So the only leap of faith you can take is on the basis of how badly do they want to do it and how much fire in their belly do they have.
So it's not just a belief in yourself, it is you have to believe the people that you get associated with. Shantanu, my last question to you is, what is that one piece of advice that you have for the young people who want to become entrepreneurs, but are torn between willing to follow their purpose and the security of a high-paying job?
Right. That's always a tricky question. But I think it is okay. First of all, it is okay to test out an entrepreneurial dream that you have while having a full-time job. But after you've successfully tested it and you know the demand is there and you know that what you're contributing as a service or a product will solve a particular problem, if after that you don't let go of that job, then you really are not into it as much as you should be, because having one leg on each stone will never sort of fill that gap. Because if entrepreneurial journey is basically creating something from scratch, how can you do it if you only have half of yourself there? You literally have to be so immersed in it that if you're not giving you 100%, it's a challenge. And the people you are expecting to follow, that will follow you, they will also be observing and they will also only give in as much as you are giving. And if you're not all there, then they will not be all there. So from a perspective of chasing your entrepreneurial journey versus having a secure job, I think that would be a good start. People feel that right from the get-go, it's a binary decision between one or the other. It can be a balance to begin with, but if your customers are validated, if your concept is validated, and if you still continue to have second thoughts, then it will never be. And finding the right problem is something like people skip. Like I said, startups fail because they're not looking at solving the problems that actually need solving. They're solving the problems that they think that they need solving. And if you find the right problem, you've got it. And the problem is, people find a problem, they test it, and they feel, okay, this is not something that needs solving as bad, and they get really disappointed. But if you have a true entrepreneurial spirit, you will always be looking for the next one. You'll always have that need to find the next problem. So to not be disappointed when one or two of the ideas that you thought would be a startup don't work out. If you give up, then that's not an entrepreneurial spirit. You literally have to be observant. You have to observe every single thing around you and find where people are complaining, what is inconveniencing them, and what can be solved.
Shantanu, that's a brilliant advice. And, and it is not coming because somebody is just talking about it. It's coming because of true experience. Shantanu, I have enjoyed this conversation so much, I can't tell you. It is a very mature conversation that we had. And, it's so beautiful to find somebody who's doing something where with an underlying passion to make a difference. And it is also turning that passion and vision into a sustainable entrepreneurial opportunity, and where the foundation of doing this business is empathy, and empathy of not just the founder, but of every person who's a part of the ecosystem, and that is so brilliant. I congratulate you on taking this step. I am so glad that there is someone who not just talks about it, but is actioning it and making it a reality. Thank you so much for taking our time, even while you're traveling. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Shantanu.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you also. And this is, with full honesty, one of the best interviews I've had, because I love tough questions, because it gives us an opportunity to answer them honestly. And if you are creating a company based on empathy, then you just have to answer things bluntly and honestly and not sugarcoat them. And your questions have helped me do just that. So I hope people enjoy this conversation.
I'm sure.